Good morning, dear student. Today we are continually under the scramble for Cameroon, this time with the request of British annexation. Cameroonian kings and chiefs made several requests to the British demanding annexation. The natives prefer the British to annex Cameroon despite presence of other European powers along the Cameroon coast like France and Germany. The first formal request was made on the 7th of August 1879 by Douala kings led by King Akwa. This letter that was written on the 7th August 1879 termed Dearest Madame was sent to Queen Victoria or was addressed to Queen Victoria. The Douala king, after writing this petition to Queen Victoria, never received any response to this letter. The second request was made on the 8th of March 1881, this time by King Bell, to consult Herwet, reminding Herwet that he wanted Cameroon to be annexed by the British. King Bell did not receive any positive reaction from the British government. This pushed King Bell and King Akwa on the 6th of November 1881 to address a joint letter, this time to the British Prime Minister, who was called William Gladstone, asking him to annex Cameroon. Yet, the British Prime Minister did not give a favorable response to their letter. Good. Now, these were the three precise letters written by the Douala kings requesting British annexation. These kings were influenced by some attitude of the British, which pushed them to demand the annexation. This is pushing us to examine reason why the coastal chief requested British annexation. First, achievement of the London Baptist missionaries. The Cameroonian coastal chiefs were impressed with the remarkable achievement of the London Baptist Missionary Society. They constructed churches, converted the natives to Christianity, opened schools, improved on health and standard of living of the natives. Thus, the natives were convinced that more achievements were going to come under British colonial administration. Hence, they demanded for the annexation. The second reason that pushed the native to request for British annexation were the numerous intertribal wars that was fought along the Cameroon coast. They strongly believed that British annexation was going to end these wars. For this reason, several appeals were made by Cameroonian coastal chiefs requesting British annexation. The next reason why Cameroonian coastal chiefs wanted British annexation was to maintain their trade advantages. The introduction of legitimate trade gave advantage to Cameroonians coastal chiefs who acted as middlemen in the trade. They respected this middleman monopoly by the British, or the British respected this middleman monopoly and equally paid a special custom duty called commerce. This pushed the coastal chief to request British annexation to maintain these advantages. Native request for British annexation was also influenced by the presence of the British traders and missionaries along the Cameroon coast. These traders and missionaries put pressure on the coastal chief to write letters requesting for annexation. There are even allegations that they personally wrote some of those letters on behalf of the coastal chief. This was because they needed British protection in order to carry out their activities effectively. The coastal people of Cameroon fell in love with British culture. The interaction between the natives and the British led to the introduction of Pidgin English. As a result, Cameroonians adopted English titles such as Prince, Chief, Kings, and Duke. They therefore wanted British annexation to maintain this title. Cameroonian coastal chief demanded British annexation because they wanted to continue receiving annual gifts from the British. In an attempt to abolish the slave trade, the British gave the coastal chief annual gifts to compensate them, such as financial rewards, scarlet coat with epaulet. Thus, the coastal chief preferred British annexation because they feared that if another power annexed Cameroon, they were no longer going to receive those gifts. Lastly, native requests for British annexation of Cameroon were influenced by the setting up of the Court of Equity in Douala. Was influenced by the setting up of equity in Douala. It was set up by the British in Douala to resolve trade conflict. It handled conflict between the British traders and the native without discrimination. Thus, they were feared that if a different power other than the British annexed Cameroon, this court was going to be abolished. This influenced request for annexation. When the natives requested for British annexation, the British were reluctant to annex Cameroon. They did not want to annex Cameroon. Let's examine the reason why Britain refused or was reluctant to annex Cameroon. One of the first factors that pushed Britain to reject the native requests for annexation was the confidence in trade treaties. The British were reluctant to annex Cameroon because they had confidence in trade treaties, which they signed with the Cameroonian coastal chief. In 1840, for example,